No one was ever meant to discover this. The receipt itself was a ghost, a frail brown slip of paper tucked deep inside the binding of an old tax ledger from 1849. It had slept in silence for more than 170 years, preserved only by dust and the quiet neglect of history. On the humid morning of April 11th, in the thick, mosquito-filled air of Augustin Parish, Louisiana, a transaction took place that was never supposed to be remembered. A young man, barely 19, was sold on the courthouse steps. His supposed crime was never truly recorded. The price was $17. A widow named Maeve O'Connell bought him. She was a new immigrant, her husband taken by fever the previous year, and she needed help keeping her small, struggling farm alive. She saw only a boy, nothing more, a purchase made from desperation she could hardly understand. She handed over 17 copper pennies, signed the paper with a shaking X, and led him away. She never knew his real name wasn't Kalin. She never knew the charge against him had been invented, a falsehood built to serve someone else's purpose, and she certainly never knew who he had been secretly married to only 3 months before. How does a story like this vanish from memory? What were we never supposed to find out? The truth wasn't just buried in an archive. It was erased by a man who had the power to rewrite reality itself. He didn't only want the boy punished. He wanted him wiped away, reduced to a mere note on a scrap of paper worth 17 cents, a human life valued less than a handful of nails. The silence that followed wasn't by accident. It was crafted. The man behind this cruelty was Judge Alistair Finch. In Augustine Parish, his word wasn't just law, it was scripture. He was a man carved from stone and shadow, his family holding the town's power for 3 generations. His authority was total, not only because of his acres of land, though he owned plenty, but because he controlled what truth meant. He sat at the head of the court, appointed the sheriff, and held mortgages on half the town's businesses. To oppose Finch was to risk more than your livelihood. It was to risk your very existence. He could strike a man from the voter list, ruin his credit, or seize his home through a forgotten clause. He was a king in all but title, and his kingdom was one of suffocating order where everyone knew their place. Kalin had once been one of Finch's possessions, bought years before from a trader traveling through from Virginia. Quiet, intelligent, and eerily calm, he fascinated the judge. Finch never saw him as human. He saw a mind to shape. He secretly had Kalin taught to read, handle ledgers, even learn some French. It was a whim, a private project. Finch took pride in owning something no one else could touch, a mind he believed he had molded. But a mind, once opened, cannot be caged. Kalin began to see the world with a clarity the judge could never predict, and that clarity led him to the one person in Augustine Parish he was forbidden to meet as an equal. Genevieve Finch, the judge's only daughter. Among the Gullah communities along the coast, there were whispered tales of shadow marriages, unions between the enslaved and the powerful, sanctified not by law but by older, deeper traditions. Kalin's story became one of those legends. Assigned to tend the judge's silent library, he met Genevieve, 17, pale and quiet, a ghost within her own house. Surrounded by wealth but trapped by expectation, she had been promised to a senator's son, a move to secure the Finch family's reach. Yet her sharp mind and restless heart found a reflection in Kalin. To her, he was not a servant, not property, but the only other person in her world who truly seemed alive. Their first conversations began as whispers among the books. He spoke of the stars. She spoke of the sea. He shared constellations from African folklore. She read poetry she was forbidden to touch. They were both prisoners in a gilded cage, and within that confinement, something rare began to grow. More than affection, it was defiance of the soul. One cold winter night, beneath the bare limbs of an old live oak, they made a vow. Knowing no priest or law would bless them, they sought a root doctor named Elizabeth, a woman of ancient faiths older than the parish itself. By candlelight, with words spoken in English and in a language the judge would have condemned as heathen, they bound themselves together. For a few stolen weeks, they lived as husband and wife in their secret world, fragile but free. Yet secrets in Augustine Parish never stayed buried for long. A misplaced book, a glance too long, a letter found by a loyal servant. The walls began to whisper. How Finch discovered them is unknown, but his reaction became legend. It was not loud rage, but a cold fury that drained the room of air. He didn't confront them directly. He moved his pieces in silence. Genevieve was locked away, her books confiscated, her freedom stripped until all she could see was her father's unmoving face. He told her she had disgraced her family, her name, and her God. His cruelty was patient, designed to shatter her spirit. Kaylin's punishment was just as deliberate. Death would have been too kind. Finch wanted erasure, the kind that leaves no shadow. He planted a silver locket, a gift to his daughter among Kaylin's few possessions. The sheriff, loyal as always, discovered the theft. Kaylin was dragged from his bed at night, never to see Genevieve again. 2 weeks passed in a damp, dark cell, the only sound that of rats and dripping water. The charge read, theft of property valued at $20. Parish law was clear, a public auction. Everything was legal, and every word a lie. Finch's pen removed Kaylin from the record, his daughter's love written out of existence. The auction happened on April 11th. The air was thick and heavy, storm clouds threatening. A small crowd gathered for routine parish business, livestock, confiscated goods. Kaylin was the final lot. Hands bound, dressed neatly, he stood silent. The auctioneer, deeply indebted to Finch, began without emotion. No mention of Kaylin's learning, his skill, or his humanity, only the charge, the ruling, and the opening bid, 17 cents. Murmurs spread through the crowd. A man like him could have sold for hundreds. 17 cents was not a price, it was a warning. Everyone present understood that this was no normal sale, but a public humiliation designed by unseen authority. No one dared interfere. Then Maeve O'Connell stepped forward. She didn't see politics or punishment. She saw only a boy she could afford. Her 3 acres and her debts had left her desperate. "I'll take him," she said quietly. The auctioneer hesitated, glancing up toward the courthouse window. 17 cents, he called, his voice cracking. Finch had planned for Kaylin to remain unsold, bound for a brutal work farm where few returned alive. But now a legal bid had been made, and rejecting it would violate the very law Finch ruled with. "Going once," the auctioneer said, eyes still flicking to the judge's window. "Going twice." He waited, as if the universe might correct this mistake. Nothing. The cicadas screamed in the trees, their sound like tearing nerves. "Sold!" he shouted at last, slamming the gavel with a sound that felt final and wrong. Maeve counted out her coins, her hands trembling as she placed them in the auctioneer's palm. The clerk wrote the deed quickly, his pen scratching in haste as if he wanted it gone from his sight. Maeve signed with her mark, and the sale was done. She had bought a human being for the price of a spool of thread. As she led Kaylin away, he never looked at her. His eyes fixed on the second-story window, the one where he knew Finch was watching. Their eyes met across the square, and in that single look, 1,000 silent things were exchanged. The judge's gaze was one of cruel satisfaction, a wordless message. "See what I've made of you." But Kaylin's eyes held something else, not hate, not defeat, a quiet, dangerous promise. Maeve saw none of it. She was only a poor widow who had made a desperate choice. She had no idea she had just become the keeper of a broken king's legacy, the unwilling guardian of a secret that, if ever told, could still set Augustine Parish aflame. The cruelest lies are often spoken through silence. That old saying perfectly described the heavy mood in the O'Connell cabin during the days that followed. Maeve didn't know how to handle Carlin. He wasn't defiant, but he was distant. From dawn till dusk, he worked the stubborn clay soil with quiet determination, every movement steady and tireless. He obeyed every request she made, but his obedience felt almost eerie. He never spoke unless spoken to, and his eyes carried a faraway look, as if they saw things she could never understand. Maeve tried to reach him, asked gentle questions about his past, but his answers were short. "I was in service, ma'am," he said once. When she asked if he had family, he only shook his head. The silence between them thickened, heavier than the humid summer air. It was a silence full of his unspoken memories and her unasked fears. Maeve was a kind and simple woman. To her, the idea of slavery had always been something distant, something that existed far away on large plantations, not in her quiet world. But now it sat at her table, alive and silent. She found herself studying him, trying to understand the mystery that had come into her life. His hands were calloused from new labor, yet they didn't seem like a worker's hands. They were long, skilled hands. Even in torn clothes, he carried a quiet grace that didn't belong to a man of the fields. One night, she saw him outside looking up at the stars, his lips moving softly. He wasn't praying. He was naming the stars. Meanwhile, the judge's anger was burning like fire beneath cold ashes. The widow's interference had spoiled his perfect plan for revenge. Caelan was supposed to disappear into the parish work farm, swallowed by slow oblivion. Instead, he was alive, just 2 miles away, a living reminder of his daughter's betrayal. Every day that Caelan breathed was an insult to the judge's pride. His obsession grew. He sent the sheriff to ride past the O'Connell place twice a day, silent warnings of his reach. He pressured the local storekeeper to refuse Maeve credit, hoping hunger would force her to sell the boy. But Maeve was stronger than he thought, and the townsfolk, who hated the judge's cruelty, began helping her in secret. Someone left a sack of flour on her porch. Another left jars of jam. Each small act of kindness was a quiet act of rebellion. The judge's frustration became unbearable. He wanted Caelan gone, but quietly. Another public scandal would not do. It had to be clean, silent, with no trace leading back to him. So he looked for a man who could move unseen, someone who could make problems vanish. He found that man in a Cajun tracker named Roche. People whispered about Roche, that he lived deep in the swamps and possessed strange, almost unnatural talents. He was known for finding those who didn't want to be found, and for the right price, making sure they were never seen again. Back on the farm, the quiet rhythm between Maeve and Caelan began to change. Caelan still felt the judge's eyes on him, but slowly he began to reveal pieces of who he truly was. It was risky, but he needed someone to trust, and Maeve was his only hope. One evening, he saw her struggling with her late husband's account book. She could read numbers but not words. Without a word, he stepped closer. "If I may, ma'am," he said softly, taking the ledger. Within minutes, the pages were neatly organized in his elegant handwriting. Maeve stared at him, astonished. "Where did you learn to do that?" she asked. "The judge valued certain skills," he replied with quiet irony. From that night on, he helped her more, teaching her better ways to water the fields, showing her how to mend tools she thought were ruined. He was more than a laborer, he was a survivor who knew how to make life work in hard places. Slowly, a fragile bond formed between them. It wasn't friendship, not yet, but a shared respect between two lonely souls clinging to the same fragile hope in a merciless world. Maeve began to see him differently, not as a man she'd bought for 17 cents, but as someone full of secrets and depth. And with that realization came fear. Whatever he had done to anger Judge Finch, it must have been extraordinary. She knew she wasn't just sheltering a man, she was guarding a dangerous secret, and in Augustine Parish, secrets often carried a deadly price. An old diary from the parish once described the man called Roch, saw the judge's man in town today. He doesn't walk like other men, he moves like a water snake, and his eyes, swamp-colored, see everything you wish to hide. That was the man now prowling near Maeve's farm. Kaelin sensed his presence before seeing him. The forest grew too still. Birds stopped singing. Even the insects were silent. It was the quiet that comes when a hunter is near. Kaelin understood at once. The judge was done waiting. He had one last chance, one secret even Genevieve didn't know. Before being captured, he had hidden proof of their marriage, not on paper, but in something stronger. He took a small book of poetry Genevieve had given him and wrote, on the back cover, a brief account of their secret vows in ink made from berries and rust. He signed both their names and pricked her finger to mark her bloody thumbprint beside it. It was a bond that could never be denied. That little book could destroy the Finch name forever. He hid it where the judge would never search, inside the old parish church, behind a loose stone in the fireplace. But Kaelin couldn't go there himself. He was always being watched. He needed someone unnoticed, someone innocent. So he began to draw in the dirt as he worked, tracing strange shapes with a stick. At first, Maeve thought it was nothing, just idle doodles. Then she realized they were maps. One evening, as she brought him water, he didn't look up. He traced a line from her cabin to a church steeple, then a square inside it, beside the shape of a flame. When he finally lifted his eyes, they spoke without words. Maeve's heart tightened. She knew what he was asking. He wanted her to go to the church, to find whatever was hidden there. Doing that would mean crossing a line she could never uncross. She could have wiped the drawings away and pretended she understood nothing. But the look in his eyes haunted her. It wasn't the look of a guilty man. It was the look of someone desperate to save his soul. For 2 days, she battled with fear. Then, on the third night, she made her choice. After Kaelin had fallen asleep in the barn, she slipped out with a lantern in her hand. The walk to the church felt endless. Every rustle sounded like danger. Every shadow seemed to carry the judge's cold gaze. The church was dark and empty, the air thick with the scent of wax and wood. Her hands shook as she searched the stones near the fireplace until she found one that moved. She pried it open and reached inside. Wrapped in oilcloth was a small leather book. Her hands trembled so much she almost dropped it. She didn't open it. She didn't dare. She only knew it was the very thing at the heart of all the danger. She tucked it into her apron and hurried home, her heart pounding. When she reached the farm at dawn, Kaelin was waiting. He hadn't slept. He was watching the road, tense and alert. When he saw the book, his eyes softened for the first time, full of raw relief. He took it gently, his fingers brushing hers. "Thank you," he whispered. "You don't need to thank me," she replied, her voice shaking. "Just tell me what we do now." Before he could speak, the sharp bark of a dog cut through the air, followed by another. Kaelin stiffened. "He's here," he said quietly. "Roch." He pressed the book back into her hands. "There's a man named Silas at the ferry by Black Creek Crossing. He's a friend, one of the few the judge can't touch. Give him this book. Tell him." He paused, eyes burning. "Tell him the mockingbird is free." Maeve stared at him in confusion. "What about you?" she asked. Kaelin's voice was steady. "The judge doesn't just want the book, he wants me." Before she could protest, he ran toward the dark woods behind the cabin, not toward the road, but into the trees, a deliberate act of sacrifice. Maeve stood frozen, clutching the book, his words echoing in her ears. Then she heard movement in the woods. Quiet, deliberate, deadly. She turned and ran. Branches tore at her arms, roots caught her feet. But she didn't stop. She only knew she had to reach Black Creek. Behind her, she could hear the hunters' silent pursuit. And ahead, faintly, the sound of Kaelin crashing through the trees, making noise on purpose, leading the danger away from her. It became a race against the rising sun. She finally appeared on the muddy edge of Black Creek. The ferry waiting there was only a wooden raft attached to a pulley system. A bent old man with dark hair stood beside it, getting ready for the morning trip. "Silas!" she cried out, stumbling toward him. The man turned, eyes sharp and focused. He looked at her torn dress, her panicked face, and the book she held tightly in her hands. "Are you Silas?" she repeated breathlessly. "I am," he answered, his deep voice calm but firm. "Kaelin sent me," she said, gasping, handing him the book. "He told me to give you this. He said the mockingbird is free." Silas's worn face showed no shock. He took the book with steady hands, his look serious. He knew exactly what it meant. Kaelin was putting the final, most dangerous part of their plan into motion. He likely would not live through the night. He had chosen to give up his life to make sure the truth survived. Across the creek, a sharp cry echoed through the mist, suddenly cut short. Maeve froze, her blood turning cold. She knew that sound. It was Kaelin. Silas's jaw tightened. "Get on the ferry," he ordered quickly. Without wasting a second, he untied the rope and began pulling them across the swirling water, his old muscles straining with effort. As they reached the middle of the creek, they saw him. Rock the tracker stepped out from the tree line on the far side, holding a long, cruel-looking knife, its dark blade glinting faintly. He stared at the ferry with cold fury. He had come too late. Maeve looked at the man who had hunted and likely killed the boy she had bought for 17 cents. A wave of grief and sickness hit her, nearly knocking her to her knees. She had been a pawn in a game she barely understood, and now people were dying because of it. "What happens now?" she whispered hoarsely. Silas didn't glance at her. His eyes stayed fixed on the far bank, daring the tracker to try and follow. "Now," he said, voice heavy with sadness, "the judge loses." He pulled the book from his coat and lifted it for Maeve to see. It was a silent promise that this story would not die in darkness. Rock stared a moment longer, then disappeared back into the woods, his mission both finished and broken. When the ferry reached the far side, it felt like stepping into another world, one outside the judge's grasp. Silas tied up the ferry and led Maeve to a hidden cabin nearby. Inside, an oil lamp filled the room with a soft golden light. Silas placed the book carefully on the table. "You're safe here for now," he said quietly. "Who are you?" Maeve finally asked. "I knew Kaelin's mother," Silas said, voice low and weary. "Long before the judge bought her. We were from the same part of Virginia. I promised her I'd look after her boy, but I failed. I was too afraid of what the judge could do. Kaelin knew I ran this ferry. He knew I had friends who helped people disappear, the Underground Railroad. He reached out weeks ago, certain the judge had learned his secret. We came up with a desperate plan. Getting him out was one thing, but he refused to go without proof. Without this book," he said, tapping the cover gently. "A man's life may end, but truth lasts if someone's brave enough to guard it." He looked at her then, his eyes full of regret. He knew he wouldn't survive. He made me promise that if he ever sent the signal, I'd get this book to the north no matter what. He gave his life so the world would one day know what the judge did to his own daughter. Maeve broke down crying. The tears she had held back for weeks finally came. She cried for the boy she barely knew but who had changed everything. She wept for his lost life and for the cruelty of it all. Silas said nothing, quietly letting her grieve. When she finally lifted her head, exhausted, she stared at the book. "His wife," she whispered, "the judge's daughter. What happened to her?" Silas's face hardened. After the judge locked her away, he brought in a doctor from New Orleans, someone who treated female hysteria. They said she was unstable, a danger to herself. They sent her to an asylum in Mobile, a place meant for forgetting. She became another prisoner, just like Kaylin. The judge took everything from her, her husband, her freedom, even her name. The world believes Genevieve Finch went insane and was sent away, but it's all lies. The cruelty was staggering. He hadn't just erased Kaylin, he had erased his own daughter, turning her into a living ghost. Now, Maeve finally understood. The 17 cents, the auction, the tracker. It had all been part of a careful plan of control, and she had unknowingly torn it apart. "What's in the book?" she asked softly. Silas opened it and turned to the back cover. There, in Kaylin's neat handwriting, was the story of their secret marriage. Below it were two marks, Kaylin's signature and a small brown-red smudge, a bloody thumbprint. "Genevieve's mark," Silas said, "proof she agreed freely. In the right hands, this book destroys the judge's version of events. It shows he created the theft charge and had his daughter locked away to hide what really happened. My friends will get this to the abolitionist publishers in Philadelphia. They'll print it. The world will know. It won't bring Kaylin back or free Genevieve, but it will tear down the judge's power. He'll never put out that fire." He looked at Maeve seriously. "But you can't go back to Augustine Parish. The judge will never stop hunting you. You're the only witness left." Maeve thought of her home, her husband's grave, everything gone. She was now a refugee in a hidden war. "Where will I go?" she asked. "North," Silas replied. "We'll find you a safe place, a new life. It's what Kaylin would have wanted." And so Maeve vanished, helped by Silas and the Underground Railroad. She traveled at night, hiding in barns and secret attics, moving north until Louisiana became just a memory. She cut her hair, changed her name, and started over as a woman with no past. The book went with her, a sacred relic passed from hand to hand until it reached Philadelphia. In 1850, a pamphlet appeared called A Parish of Lies. It told the story of a powerful Southern judge, his daughter, and the educated slave he destroyed to protect his reputation. The names were missing, but everyone could tell who it was. The big newspapers called it propaganda, but the truth had already taken root. The judge's once absolute power began to crack. He became paranoid, haunted by ghosts of his own making. Truth, once freed, cannot be caged again. Judge Alistair Finch died in 1863, alone in his library. Genevieve stayed in the asylum until 1888, silent and broken. Rock the Tracker vanished into the swamps. Some said his body was found a year later, torn apart by an alligator. Others said justice finally found him. Silas kept working the ferry, helping others to freedom. Kaylin's body was never found. Rock had likely buried him deep in the swamp, one more soul swallowed by Louisiana's dark earth. But his story lived. It became a whisper, a legend passed quietly among those who remembered. It proved that while people can be silenced, truth never dies. Maeve grew old in Ohio, living quietly. She never spoke of it, but those close to her said she kept a small worn pamphlet locked away until the end. It was the story of the boy she bought for 17 cents. The boy who became a husband, a rebel, and a kind of king in a world that refused to see him. Today, there's no official record of what happened. The Finch name still stands proudly on the courthouse and the library. History, as written, belongs to the victors. But down by Black Creek, some say a ghost still walks, searching for a book, carrying a truth that cost everything. If you've come this far, comment below. The mockingbird is free. You are now part of the story, a keeper of a truth that was meant to be lost. It's not an easy burden to know something the world tried to erase. The receipt for 17 cents sits now in a university archive. Most people who see it only see a strange sale from a cruel past. They notice the price, but not the story behind it. They cannot see the hidden marriage, the cruel father, or the courage of a woman who chose to act. Those 17 pennies were not just payment for a boy. They were the price of love, courage, and rebellion. To most, it's just a relic. But to those who understand, it's a symbol of defiance, fought in whispers and carried in the hearts of those who refuse to be forgotten. It reminds us that the most important stories often leave the faintest trace. They must be protected, remembered, and passed on. These are the truths that powerful men tried to bury under laws and lies. The world that allowed Judge Finch to act as he did wasn't just built on slavery, it was built on fear. Kaylin and Genevieve's greatest rebellion was daring to see each other as equals. That single act shattered the illusion of power. The judge's cruelty was not just punishment, it was desperation, a frantic attempt to destroy a truth that revealed his world as a lie. And then there was Maeve, the ordinary woman who made an extraordinary choice. She wasn't a hero or a fighter, but she saw the truth and could not look away. Most people would have ignored it. That quiet apathy is what lets evil survive. But Maeve, with nothing but courage, chose to act. She ran through the woods with a book she could barely read, and in doing so, she saved a truth greater than any law. She carried forward a story that was never meant to live. They say that even years later, nurses at the asylum spoke of a silent woman in room 2113. Every April 11th, she drew the same image on her wall, a mockingbird with its throat cut. Sometimes she used charcoal, sometimes her own blood. The staff scrubbed it away, but it always returned. It was her quiet rebellion, her way of remembering. Even after everything, Genevieve's love for Kaylin endured, buried but alive. It was a story told without words, a love written in blood and silence, a truth that no cage could contain.